So speaking about evapotranspiration, we are going south. So the next keynote is part of the remote sensing session that we had yesterday. So we means Manuela Grippa from JET Toulouse, Karsten Monska from Jülich, and myself. I have a foot in CESBio Toulouse also, and one foot in the Indo-French Cell for Water Science in Bangalore. So the next keynote speaker, in 1993, we had a big breakthrough through a workshop in La Londe-les-Morts using land surface temperature from satellite to derive evapotranspiration. And the next keynote speaker, of course, at that time, is not old enough. He was not even in a master. But Hector, who is now with the Spanish National Research Council, has been doing a lot of work and has been a key player in this tradition of tools using land surface temperature acquired by a wide range of sensors, from UAV data to geostationary data, and also for a wide range of covers, agricultural cover, but also very complex canopies like vineyards or like savannas. So it's really a great pleasure to have him today. Hector also was a key player in open science, because actually before him, so 1993, you did your PhD in 2009, you did the defense. There was not even a repository of all those models using land surface temperature from Landsat or whatever, and he was actually the first one to actually gather all this material and improve with a lot of new models. And also he has been a key player in the Copernicus system by working with his colleague from Copenhagen University to produce in the Copernicus system an evapotranspiration derived from Sentinel-2 and Sentinel-3. So it's a great pleasure to have you here, Hector, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gilles, for this very nice introduction. I have very little to say, so if you want to, we can go for lunch now. But yeah, as Gilles mentioned, and yeah, I'm going to talk about the use of proximal and remote sensing in order to model water and energy fluxes, let's say evapotranspiration, in complex arid ecosystems. Why arid or semi-arid, let's say? Because, yeah, we've seen in the Monty trip that in Orgeval you were estimating ET using the FAO56 Sperma-Montier. And yeah, in this type of conditions is perfect. But once you go south and you were into water limit conditions, this approach is let's say, not valid on all times. So that's the reason that we need some particular thermal infrared information. So, well, I use this. So, yeah, maybe I'm going to talk first about the interest of optical sensors, and in particular thermal infrared, why we need it. What are the challenges of modeling ET in this kind of semi-arid and heterogeneous canopies? Then, as well, going to follow with our current research lines about the integration of remote sensing and geophysics for the studies on Earth critical zones, in particular in the soil plant atmosphere continuum. And as well, I want to say a few words about the role of Earth observation microwave sensors that we should not forget anyways. So yes, surface temperature is important because it's the critical boundary conditions for heat exchange. So plants, our canopies, are receiving radiation, and this radiation is basically heat, and this heat is transformed either in increase of temperature, sensible heat flux, or in terms of transpiring water. So plants use the transpiration for not only for, well, it's using transpiration in order to keep their temperature through the latent heat flux, but as soon as plants are stressed, water stressed, or don't have enough water in the soil, stomata will close, the change of water will be reduced, as well the uptake of CO2 will be reduced, and therefore this radiation intercepted by the canopy is going to transfer in an increase of temperature on the canopy. So therefore, we need thermal infrared or any thermometer in order to measure or estimate the canopy temperature and therefore try to estimate ET. The way we do it is through energy balance models. So we usually, when we are using this thermal infrared, we are not working on water balance models, but going to the other side of the evapotranspiration, so the latent heat flux. So basically, we assume that the available energy at the surface, the net radiation minus the heat storage, is split between the latent heat flux, the transpiration or the evaporation, and the sensible heat flux, the increase of temperature in the surface. So yeah, so of course we need temperature, but this is not the only variable we need. So we need ancillary data and as well important or critical data related to short wave information or multispectral data in order in particular to estimate the, where is the available energy. Just summarizing and simplifying things, we need to know spectral properties in order to derive the albedo, so how much solar radiation is absorbing the canopy or the surface, and as well some structural characteristics, basically Lifferay index, which tell us how much energy is partitioning between the canopy and the soil surface. And yeah, the sensible heat flux, as we mentioned, can be expressed as a gradient between the surface and air temperature. And this this transport is modulated by through eddies, through turbulence. And this is how we summarize this very complex process into some simplified aerodynamic resistances. These aerodynamic resistances are a function of the canopy roughness or canopy structure, but also wind speed and so on. And so this is the model I've been working since I started my research. As Gilles mentioned, this in 1993 was the inception of this type of models. But yeah, it was finally published in 1995. Is the two-source energy balance model. So it partitioned the fluxes between two sources, canopy and soil. This model is based on physical principle, although it's not free for assumptions and limitations, as we will see. For instance, one of the main limitations, and this is what I'm going to develop later on, is that originally this model was mainly derived for homogeneous canopies. So a perfect herbaceous cropland, for instance. The characteristic it has is able to partition transpiration, canopy transpiration and evaporation by partitioning the fluxes and the actual decomposing the surface temperature into a canopy and soil temperature. And it's a series game of resistances, so this turbulent exchange of heat and water allows for exchange of heat between the soil and the canopy. As well, it's been applied in a wide range of canopies and climates, therefore we consider it's rather robust, although, as I mentioned, not free from assumption and limitations, and therefore is continuously in development, and as well provide all the improvements in an open source repository we have in GitHub. So one of the main challenges we have in these semi-arid ecosystems is that most of the canopies are not homogeneous. Probably the most challenging is the savannas, or what we call in Spain the dehesas, which is a kind of man-made savanna in which it's a perfect link between agroecology and as well economic development. So this is where we raise the livestock, in particular the Iberian pork, and this is when we have the Spanish ham, the acorn-fed ham, which is kind of the highest quality ham we produce in Spain. You can see that this is very far from what we assume in most of the models. So we have first 2 layers of canopies and as well a tree canopy that is kind of isolated. And this causes as well a very distinct radiation regime, but as well a very distinct turbulent exchange of heat and water. Another example are vineyards or any row crops in which as well we have kind of a wall of vegetation and in between a row that can be either covered by a cover crop or not. And this as well provides a huge challenge because how radiation is transmitted and partitioned between the canopy and the soil depends a lot on the actual canopy structure, as well on the solar position on relationship to the row direction. So it's not the same to have a north-south row than an east-west row. You can see some examples here from this study. So we were wondering what can we do in order to improve the model, in order to get better estimates of ET in these cases. So we developed a very simplistic model and using as well proximal sensing and as well meteorological sensors. So this is well, most of the results I'm showing you now is a collaboration I had with colleagues in the US, USDA, UC Davis, Utah State University, and large, etc. In a very large observatory in vineyards and other tree crops. So yeah, they place radiation measuring boards in the vineyard row in order that we are able to measure continuously how radiation is transmitted through the canopy. In this case, we are simplifying things and we are trying to model the total radiation partitioning, so we finally average out all these measurements in order to get a canopy scale radiation partitioning. And we developed a very simplistic geometric model, assuming that vines are perfect prints with a given canopy height, a canopy width, and a separation between rows. And we applied, and some colleagues as well applied different models, comparing against the measurements, using kind of the business as usual model that is the blue line, and the measure is the purple line. As you see that the original approach in which it assumes a kind of rather homogeneous canopy, it deviates a lot on the different sites, vineyards. Whereas other models based on this approach get closer to the model. And we also try to evaluate using kind of a benchmark as a three-dimensional radiative transfer model in order to see how close we are to a kind of more complex model. Of course, we want to have a trade-off between simplicity and complexity, and the more complex the model, probably the better answer will give us. But then if we want to make this operational, we want to take a step back and go for more simple models like these two ones, kind of geometric simplified models. Another challenge is the turbulent exchange of heat and water vapor in these canopies. And basically, we saw two main effects. First, the interaction between the wind and the row lines is very different, and how the turbulence is, how the roughness is considered, whether the wind is blowing along the lines or whether the wind is blowing across the lines, because the wind is facing more obstacles, and this is kind of enhancing some turbulence. So we try to model this by an increase of surface roughness, which is expressed here, how wind attenuates from the measuring sensor towards the canopy in the downwind and the crosswind, but also how wind attenuates in a vertically heterogeneous canopy. So as well, most of the models originally assume homogeneous, vertically homogeneous canopy, and the wind attenuation follows kind of an exponential decay. This is not the case when the canopy is stored or accumulated in an area in which we have a bunch of leaves on some point, then maybe we have only trunks, and then we might find some grass layer. So this will have as well an effect on how wind attenuates through the canopy. Other challenge is, as I mentioned, sometimes we are dealing with more than 2 heat fluxes. I forgot to mention that in all these cases, we are using only 2 sources. Even though we try to model radiation, we are just keeping on that. We are not looking at how shading is affecting sensible heat flux and latent heat flux. This is one of the limitations we have with the TSEP model. So only considers effective canopy temperature and effective soil temperature, not differentiate between shade canopy and sunlit canopy and soil. But yeah, we can take one step forward, and in cases that, as the savannas, that we have 2 canopy layers, or in tree crops with a cover crops, as well, there's an interest specifically for farmers to know how much water is being used by the crop cover, because we know that cover crops are beneficial. They are protecting from erosion. They are providing carbon to the soil, etc. But yeah, there's a concern by farmers that they are stealing water to their productive tree. So yeah, my colleague Vicente developed a kind of an extension of the 2-source energy balance model by extending the model to a 3-source energy balance model, in which we try to partition in the fluxes between the canopy, the tree canopy, the homogeneous grass layer, and the soil. So we have 2 sources of transpiration and 1 source of evaporation. And these are the results of the model in these vineyards. Of course, we are also as well seeing how the models compare, for instance, the 3-source model against the original 2-source model in this case, and they are very close because the effect of the cover crop is non-existent. But once we try to model fluxes in this type of vineyards with a cover crop, we see that the model, the 3-step model, in which it tries to partition the canopy, improves significantly, or well, let's say slightly, the fluxes by TSEP. Of course, this requires more input data, might not be operational, and we'll talk about this a bit later. But yeah, as well, can be used as a tool for farmers in order to evaluate whether the cover crop or not is using water from the soil matrix, a significant amount of water. Other challenge we have is the advection of dry air from bare areas or for rain-fed areas into well-water plots, like irrigated areas. And this causes that there's an increase on the evaporative demand on these crops, increasing the VPD, the vapor pressure deficit, and TSEP model is not adapted to that because the way it was designed is not considering VPD into the equations. So we saw that the model was failing, and especially in this very high advection in which the sensible heat flux in daytime can become negative, so we have a huge evaporative demand, and we see that the original TSEP model is not able to evaluate or predict these cases. So it yields values always close to 0 and very lower, as compared to the negative values observed by the Eddy covariance tower. So we kind of developed a new version, which is based on Shuttleworth and Wallace model, so extending the full two source into the heat and the latent heat flux. And we see that this new model that do consider the VPD into the equations improves the agreement in those cases of negative daytime sensible heat flux. Then, and this is kind of the new research lines and how and what we are doing right now is, of course, that this semi-arid condition, especially these tree crops, etc., they are spreading the roots too much deeper and too much wider that we can expect or we can figure out. Especially most of the state-of-the-art land surface model, in our opinion, tend to underestimate the effect of root penetration in these very well-adapted species in semi-arid. So here we have an example from my colleague Ben doing geophysics and trying to use geophysics to really map the roots. And this is an example as well in very karstic environments from maybe some of you have been co-authorship this paper in which trees in karstic environment are very well adapted and go very deep into the soil in order to draft water from deeper layers of the soil. So that's the reason that now we are trying to combine remote sensing or proximal sensing with geophysics. So we are trying to combine using UAVs with thermal infrared information in these savannas, and as well electrical tomography resistivity and electromagnetic mapping with an antenna, in order to try to map both what is happening from the soil from the soil surface towards the atmosphere, but as well what's happening underneath the soil in the soil subsurface. And we can see, for instance, that in these environments, in summertime, this is a tomography in this line, and the green triangles are the trees. We see that we have a very, very resistive, probably very dry topsoil layer, and therefore in summer the grass is dead, non-active, but we have a highly conductive layer in the subsoil that might be related to clay, but as well to water. And as we see some heterogeneities probably caused by the effect of the trees. And therefore, these trees are actually transpiring in summer. We know that because we have several eddy covariance towers, and we do through modeling. So we try to get the full picture, and as well try to see whether with this combined observation of energy balance modeling with geophysics, with detailed land surface model or soil vegetation atmosphere transfer models, can we really try to get an idea or estimate of the root depth in these cases? And this is kind of a proof of concept that Ben did on how the assimilation of thermal-based energy balance models, so actual ET, can help in order to can be assimilated into this model in order to get a better idea of the soil water potential and as well on the root depth. So in here you can see the red line is the kind of the prescribed root depth by this is just simulations, so this is a proof of concept, or this is the kind of our ground truth root depth. And we see how by assimilating in time observations of ET, we are getting closer to the actual roof depth and reducing as well the uncertainty, as opposed to the kind of free loop case in which we cannot really guess how deep are the roots. Other line of research we are doing is the link of water and energy fluxes with carbon. As I mentioned, The main, the transpiration is mainly for stomata. So if plants are stressed, they close stomata, and this as well causes a loss of water, carbon uptake. So we see that two-source solar energy balance is only the sensible part of the Shuttleworth and Wallace model. So H is here. But yeah, we are with the energy balance and with thermal infrared information, we are able to estimate canopy transpiration or canopy latent heat flux, soil latent heat flux, and get estimates of the different aerodynamic resistances. So by inverting the Shuttleworth and Wallace model, we can get an estimate of the effective stomata conductance, which at the same time can be ingested in a Farquhar-based GPP model. Is it? Okay, so yeah, I'm almost finished. So this is an example in which we evaluate all the fluxes. And another take of measures is when we evaluate energy balance models, we usually like to evaluate both sensible heat and latent heat flux. In this case, we are evaluating the three in order to see whether the model is giving me the right answer by the wrong reasons. So, because since we are doing an energy balance model, maybe we can get in good estimates of latent heat flux because maybe we are overestimating H and underestimating the available energy. So by including all the turbulent transport in the validation, we get a better idea on the model performance. And just to find, let's not forget the microwave sensors. Satellite microwave sensors are just sensitive to the topsoil layer. So we have to be aware that, especially in these semi-arid areas, surface soil moisture is usually decoupled to root soil moisture. So I will not encourage the use of directly microwave sensors into soil water balance models because there's this decoupling and might be underestimate transpiration. But as well, we know that surface soil moisture is an indicator of soil evaporation. So we can as well constrain our TSEP model for the evaporation part and get with microwave soil moisture. And as well, optical sensing is sensitive to clouds, so we don't have data when we have clouds. And if we want to do some water accounting or get some continuous estimate of ET, we need to do some gap filling. So this data, microwave is transparent to clouds, can be useful to help in this cloud filling. This is work in progress. This is an example on how microwave is ingested in the two-source model, how improve against the original model using, in this case, purely air observation data. So we are using not all the improvement we made because this is not operational, but using data that can be operationally retrieved at global scale, like biophysical trends from Sentinel Landsat, land surface temperature, weather from reanalysis from ERA5, and is being validated in all ICOS sites. And that's all. Thank you all for your attention.